name is Caro de Posada, and this is our Connect with Caro Expert Series. I have a mission to inspire people to live better, healthier, happier lives. And I love to share with you my friends, people that I admire or that I've met, along the way in this journey, people that are experts in their field, in their areas, and I love to share them with you. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to be talking with my dear friend, Alan Stein here, and we're going to be talking about habits and health and all these wonderful things. If you have questions along the way, feel free to put them on the chat. We will address them. This is an interactive experience. There's a reason I do these live as opposed to just recording a podcast. And it's because I believe in the energy of the room. There are people here that need to hear this message. And if you're here and you're one of them and you have a question and you want to engage with Alan, this is a unique opportunity to do so, because most people have to pay many thousands of dollars to be able to hear him and interact with him. So with that said, this is my friend, Alan Stein. And Alan is a really cool guy because he started his journey as a basketball coach. So he has this unique insight to crazy players. Like Alan, when my son found out that you coached Kevin Durant and that you have access to all these incredible players, he was like, can I skip school and attend the call and just, listen to him? So he has this crazy insight to these champions and to these, the habits that these champions adopt. And he has dedicated his life to getting those principles and habits and not only applying them in his own life, but also teaching other people how to do it in their lives, in their businesses, in their corporations. So Alan, thank you for being here.
Oh my goodness, it's so great to be with you. I've been looking forward to this since we put it on the calendar, and what a beautiful intro and setup. So I'm honored to be here and looking forward to sharing and having a great convo.
So, well, a little background for people that don't know how we met. I put this on my stories on Instagram because I thought it was such an important thing. But you and I met at National Speakers Association when you were one of the speakers for our youth program. And one of the things that impressed me the most about you was how you showed up for that volunteer experience. Like we get amazing speakers and they all come with enthusiasm and intention, and they're all great to our kids, but there was something really impressionable about you. I mean, you treated it like it was a paid job. And I always found that to be so admirable. So it leads me to my first question, which is, how did you even get into this basketball world, into this coaching? Like, how did you even get into this personal development side of things?
Well, the Cliff Notes version is basketball was my first love, and I fell in love with the game at 5 years old. And I'm so thankful that here 4 decades later, basketball is still a major pillar of my life. So I'm immensely grateful that I've been able to not only make a living, but build an extraordinary life about a game and a passion that I've had since childhood. I spent the first portion of my life as a very dedicated and committed basketball player. I was fortunate enough to play all the way through college. I played at Elon University down in North Carolina. But then it was clear to me upon graduation that I didn't quite have the skill sets or athleticism to play professionally. So I figured the next best thing would be to get into coaching. But instead of just normal basketball coaching, I actually went into performance coaching, because while I was in college, I started to develop an equal love for strength and conditioning and nutrition and mindset and fitness, all of the tangible and intangible traits that a player needs to excel. So I figured, what could be better than making my living combining my original love of basketball with this newfound love of performance training. And I became a basketball performance coach right out of college, and had a chance to work with some pretty renowned players and coaches. And they were very impressionable. I was very impressionable to the things they were teaching me. And then I did that for almost 15 years. And then 5 years ago, I decided to make the leap and leave the training space and take everything that I'd learned and become a professional keynote speaker and share these principles and lessons and rituals and routines that I had learned through the game. And as you said so beautifully in the intro, I now teach people how to apply those same principles to their lives and to their business. And it's something I'm very passionate about. But anytime I get a chance to step off a typical corporate stage and work with children and pour into kids, it's always an honor to do it. That was one of my main attractions to wanting to be a basketball performance coach, was I wanted to be able to work with youth and in addition to helping them improve their athleticism, hopefully be a good role model for them as well.
Well, that was evident by the way that you showed up for those kids. Funny story, but one thing that he did was the night before he spoke, he went out to dinner, and in the NSA youth program, these kids hang out after hours, and they go to dinner on their own, and they have a lot of independence, something that they don't usually have when they're in their regular lives. And we didn't know that Alan was watching these kids. So the next day he's delivering his speech and he says, I want, this guy and this guy and this girl to come up on stage. And he called like 5 kids, my son being one of them. And my son is like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. What did I do? So he brought them all on stage very seriously. And he's like, I believe in how you do one thing is how you do everything. And, you have to, when no one is watching, how are you behaving? And, all this kind of stuff. He gave his spiel very serious, like, and these kids are like sweating. And then all of a sudden he's like, and I want to give these kids a round of applause for being exemplary.
Yeah.
It was such a cool experience. My son to this day still talks about that experience. It was so impactful for him to be used as a positive role model in your speech.
Oh, well, that's too cool. I remember that fondly, and I remember how well behaved and well mannered those children were. And there's a few mantras that I use to kind of guide my life, and one of them is my deep belief that which gets praised gets repeated. So we should always be looking for ways to acknowledge the great work that others do and acknowledge it and call it out and celebrate it, because then we'll see more of that. And, another reason that I would want to be able to do that, but also because of my affinity for pouring into kids is, I'm the proud father of 3 children. I have 12-year-old twin sons and a 10-year-old daughter. And, I try and praise them when they do well. But then I also love them enough that I hold them accountable when they don't, when they mess up or use poor judgment, I hold them to a very high level of accountability. And I realize as a father, that old adage that it takes a village, I want others pouring into my children and teaching my children and coaching my children and, acknowledging my kids when they do well, but also caring enough to hold my kids accountable when they don't. So yeah, that was a fun little wrinkle that we could add to that talk.
Yeah. And, and this isn't really about parenting, although I feel like a lot of the moms and the dads that are listening to this are like taking notes, and they're like, I need to praise what I want to see repeated. So, it's amazing. But one thing on the lines of kids, and it will lead to us as an adult, is a question that I have as a mom of 3 young boys. And that is, when you're little, when you're 5 and you want to become a basketball player, you always dream that you're going to get to the NBA, right? I mean, or if you're a football player, you think you're going to be in the NFL. You always want to be this big thing. And parents and people like along the way kind of manage your expectations. If you want to be an actor, you want to be an NBA player or something, people are like, well, it's really rare to get into that. And, what are the chances and, all this kind of stuff. And I think kids are encouraged to study academics, to have that backup plan, because they're like, chances are you're not going to make it in this arena. So if you're not going to make it in this arena, you shouldn't focus so much on it or just, or get these expectations. But what I see in you is that the commitment that you had to the game, you prepared and you trained as if you were going to be in the NBA. And the fact that you didn't get to the NBA doesn't really matter, because it's still the person, it's shaped you. It's still a part of who you are, and you have made it a career. So I want you to talk a little bit about that. Like, as a parent, as a coach, as a person, how do you manage people's expectations, but still encourage them to be their best? Where's the fine line? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I always want kids to dream big and to shoot for the stars. And yeah, when I was young, I thought I was going to be an NBA player, and I would never, ever want to discourage that. So I want kids to dream big in any realm. It doesn't even have to be sports and anything that they want to do. But what's most important, and this is what I tell my own children, and is to develop the habits and the routines of those that you aspire to be like. So a big pillar of my work is learning how to untether from outcomes and focus on the process. Yes, statistically, the chance of making the NBA is pretty small, and most people can understand that. So not everyone can play in the NBA, but everyone can work to develop the habits and the routines and the rituals and the mindset of somebody that can make it to that level. And if you're committed to doing that, then that will bleed over to other areas of your life. And, another thing that I used to tell when I was in the basketball world, I would say to players, and I would say this for a little bit of a humor effect, but it would also be because it's true. I would say, I'd talk to 300 kids in a gym, and I would say, every single one of you can make it to the NBA. Very few of you will be able to make it to there as a player. But if your goal is to make your living around the sport that you love, there are so many different jobs, even just within the NBA, that you could aspire to have. And, we would kind of workshop it, and I would get them to yell out all of the different jobs. I mean, from team owner to general manager to ticket sales to sponsorships to referees to mascots to cheerleaders. I mean, there are so many people and so many roles and jobs that go into an NBA organization. If you want to make it to the NBA and you want basketball to be a pillar of your life, that is absolutely a reasonable goal. And in the meantime, I want you to pursue it as if you were going to be a player, and pursue it with everything you've got. But in order to do that, you have to develop those type of work habits and mindsets. And that's what I preach to people today is working on the process. Before you can become an NBA player, you need to behave as if you're an NBA player. Before you can become a champion, you need to develop championship habits and mindset. So it's process-oriented thinking is what I really try and encourage.
Now, here's something that I want to ask you about, which is, okay, so that's very noble, and it's amazing. And I feel like telling that to a 15-year-old is incredible, right? Like, just shoot for the stars and aim and blah, blah. But how do you convey that message to an exhausted mother of 3 kids who's like struggling to, make coffee in the morning because, she was up all night doing a science project? How do you convey that to a divorced dad who's traveling, every day of the week and is just trying to like make it home for their kids' basketball game? How do you convey a championship mindset and habits to somebody that is just struggling to make it just every day?
Well, first and foremost, I have nothing but the deepest empathy and compassion for anyone that's struggling in any area of their life. I mean, life is hard. I firmly believe life is good, but life is hard. And those two things can coexist simultaneously. And I know from firsthand experience how difficult parenting is in general, much less when you throw aspects like divorce and single parenting. And, it's really, really hard. So the very first thing I would say to any parent that is struggling is it's okay to not be okay, and to be kind to yourself. Cut yourself some slack. Don't strive for perfection. Just do the best you can with what you have wherever you are, and do everything you can to make sure your children know that you love them unconditionally and that you're doing everything within your power to help them mature and grow up to be well-adjusted, fulfilled contributors to this world. But don't get caught in the weeds, and don't worry about that, getting a C on that science project. It's not the end of the world. Just do the best that you can. The framework that I use with my own children. Now, as I said, I have 12-year-old twin sons and a 10-year-old daughter. All 3 of my children have told me that their goal is to play college basketball. This is not my goal. That is what they've told me their goal is.
And just to interrupt you real quick, you are a single dad as well, right? So I think people should know that you're not married. You are a single dad who is like, this is your end of the bargain here.
Yes. And to put into context, so I was married for 5 years. I've been divorced for 7. And I love to say, and I'm very proud to say, very amicably divorced. My ex-wife and I get along really well. We're actually better friends today than we were when we were married. And we make really effective co-parents. And I'm very thankful for that. And I will also acknowledge the fact that she shoulders more of the parenting burden than I do. That, she has a home-based business, and she does a remarkable job doing a lot of the caretaking as I'm often traveling and doing what I do. And thankfully, I'm very connected with my children. I see them multiple times a week. I have a great relationship. But but she really is an absolute superstar when it comes to being a single mom. So with that said, we have found a rhythm for us that works really well in raising our children. And I'm thankful for that. With
so you were saying that they want to be NBA players, all three of them.
Well, they say right now the goal is college. They want to be college players. So the framework that I use with them is I encourage them to make every decision by running it through the filter of asking this very important question. Does this take me closer to being a college basketball player, or does it take me further away? And I want them to do that with small decisions, like what do I want to eat for breakfast? Which would take you closer to being a college basketball player, eating some granola or an oatmeal, or eating a Pop-Tart? And my kids know the answer to that. Now, I don't shame them or guilt them if they want to choose Pop-Tart, but I just let them know that every single decision they make will take them either a little bit closer to their goal, or it will take them a little bit further away. And the goal should be to try to make as many decisions as possible that are in alignment with the goal that you set. So, I use that framework in all of their decision making. And the reason I like using this as a parent, it's a really helpful tool because, and part of my parenting style, I'm not a yeller. I'm not a hard disciplinarian. I don't scream at my kids. I don't guilt them. I don't shame them. I speak to them as if they are the adults that I'm hoping they grow to be. And I just simply ask them that question. And I ask them that question a lot. If one of them's misbehaving or not doing what they're supposed to at school, or one of them's playing on their phone or gaming system too much, or one of them's making poor nutritional decisions, I don't have to scold them or yell at them. All I say is, do you think that's going to help you be a college basketball player? And it quickly reframes and refocuses the lens. And they'll say, no, probably not. And I'll say, all right, well, if that's what you want, then you better start making better decisions. Because I'm a big believer that our beliefs and our behaviors need to be aligned in order for us to reach our goals. And if they're not aligned, then one of them needs to change. Either you need to change your behavior, or you need to lower your goal. And I always say that with a huge smile, because no one wants to lower their goal, which means the only side of that equation you can change is making better decisions and having better behavior. So, and part of my parenting style also is when my kids do make less than ideal decisions, or don't perform well in something, it's a life lesson. It's not permanent. We have a very open discussion about it, and we talk about it. If one of them doesn't play well in their game on a weekend and they're very upset because they missed a lot of shots, the discussion we have is, well, how much did you practice before your game? How many times before your game this past week did you go out and work on your ball handling and your shooting? And if the answer is not very much, then why are you surprised that you didn't perform well? Those two things are connected. And if you'd like to perform better next weekend, then I suggest you put in more work this week. And I deliver it in that same matter-of-fact tone, because I want my kids to learn from this. But most importantly, and this is, I think at the pinnacle of my parenting philosophy, is I want my children to know that I love them unconditionally, that my love for them has nothing to do with their performance academically or athletically. It would be my preference that my kids would study and get good grades. It would be my preference that they'd be good athletes and play well. But that's a preference. That's a very selfish preference on my end. What's most important to me is that they are happy, fulfilled, respectful, contributors to this world, and they're growing up to be the types of adults that they're capable of. And that's really the framework. So I put these things in perspective. I don't get bent out of shape that my 12-year-old doesn't play the best game of his life in a youth basketball game. In the big picture, it's really not that important.
I love that. And I am the product of divorce as well. My father and my mom were divorced, and my father was a motivational speaker, and you're like a younger version of him. You remind me so much of him, because he too worked with basketball. He was a psychologist for basketball players and Olympic players. And he worked with the Milwaukee Bucks and the LA Lakers. It's so similar. There's so many parallels between you and him. And for me, because he was divorced and traveling all the time, he did a lot of the things that you're talking about. He was so unconditionally loving to me. He found a way to be there for me, even when he wasn't. He was always present, even though he wasn't always physically present. And I consider myself to be a product of that. I grew up in a world of personal development. I grew up receiving postcards from my dad. And now I'm like, I get, this is a postcard that I received from my dad. Like, you are a postcard that I received from my dad, because it's like the message is just validating and affirming his work, his life, his legacy, like what he left behind. And you're doing exactly the same thing. So that's just a little side note on that. But
no, I appreciate that. And I want to double down on one thing you said. First of all, that is very well received, and I appreciate that. And I hope my daughter grows up to be as remarkable of a human being as you are. So it sounds like your dad did a great job, and hopefully I'm somewhat on pace with that. I wanted to double down on what I said earlier in case there's any confusion. I know that every parent listening and watching this loves their child unconditionally. There's zero doubt in my mind. But what we have to remember as adults, it's not what we say, it's what our children hear. So we can often do things that undermine the unconditional love we have, and it makes our children feel as if our love is conditional. If we withhold affection when our kids bring home a bad grade on a spelling test or don't play well in their soccer game, then in their mind, there is a connection between the two. It's my mom is happy when I get a good grade. My mom is angry when I don't. My dad is happy when I play well and I score a lot of points. My dad is irritated when I don't. And they can confuse that with love. So then they start to think, I have to perform well in order to earn the love of my parents and my family. And that's the line that I personally don't want to cross with my own children. I want them to know I love them, I believe in them, I have their back, and I am here to help guide them through the difficult waters of being preteens. And then I'm going to do everything I can to help them perform well in these areas, but that my love for them is not contingent on that. So I just wanted to clarify, because I don't want parents to think, well, of course I love my children. I know that, but we can often do things that, unconsciously undermine the way our kids feel that and receive that.
Yeah. Well, so thank you for that. And one thing I want to focus on so much, because I promised this to our audience, was to talk about their habits and their personal goals. So you said something that you apply in parenting, but again, I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning, which is I feel like what I find most impressive about you is that what you do with one thing is what you do with everything. So that framework that you're talking about, that you're teaching them to filter their decisions through, I feel like that applies to all of us, right? Like if I want to be a successful business person, then I have to filter my decisions through that. If I want to be a successful parent, I have to filter my decisions through that. And that's amazing. Now, as an adult, you have different filters. Like you have different, you have multiple, you're only supposed to have one priority. Priority is like a singular thing, but we have more than one priority. We are parents, and we are trying to succeed in business, and we do need to pay the bills, and we do need to worry about our health. So how do you apply that framework when we have so many conflict, because you talk about burnout and stress and all these other things, and we have all these conflicting things that we have to be a good parent, be a good business person, how do you do that filter for yourself?
So I use, and that's so insightful, and I'm glad you brought that up. I use a very similar framework to what I use with my children as far as their goal to be a college basketball player. But for me, mine's a little bit more macro and a little bit more evergreen. And it's actually, it's kind of a 20-year mindset. So at present, I'm 46 years old, but I am crystal clear on the man that I strive to be 20 years from now, the 66-year-old Alan. Now, first and foremost, I am completely aware of the fact that even though I take really good care of myself health-wise, that there is no promise that I'll be around for 20 more years, that time is not guaranteed and the future is not promised. So I'm not taking that for granted. But barring something unforeseen, there's no reason I shouldn't be alive 20 years from today. So my goal is 20 years from now, I want the 66-year-old Alan to be physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I want the 66-year-old Alan to have a deep, strong connection with his children, his family, his loved ones, and his friends. And I want the 66-year-old Alan to be doing what he considers meaningful work that is in service of others. So those are my three primary targets for the 66-year-old Alan. And they're very broad because they cover a lot of different things. So the framework I use in my life is every single day, I try to make as many decisions as possible that will take me closer to becoming that guy. From what I eat to what I watch on Netflix to who I follow on Instagram, to how much sleep I get. I try to make sure that as many decisions as I can are going to take me closer to being that 66-year-old. Now, the beautiful part is I'm not postponing that result because I'm making those decisions in the present tense, in the real time, which means, and I certainly hope this doesn't sound like it's lacking, humility, because it's coming from a very genuine place. Right now at 46, I am physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. Right now at 46, I have a very deep connection with my children, family, and friends. And right now at 46, I do work that I consider meaningful and in service of other people. So I'm not postponing and saying life will be good when I'm 66. Life is extraordinary right now because that's my framework. The reason I say that is, and I hope we do, but if you and I still know each other 20 years from now, when I'm 66, I don't want you to be even remotely surprised when that's who I've become, because these are the decisions that I'm making right now. And a couple thoughts on that. One, I don't aim for perfection, which is good because I'm far from it. I'm fallible, I'm flawed, I make mistakes just like everybody else. And with everything I'm sharing with you right now, I'm not speaking from a place of mastery. I haven't mastered any of this stuff. I'm working on it just like you guys are, and I find challenge and adversity the same way that everyone else does. But I'm proud of the path that I'm on, and I'm proud of the direction that I'm going. So I don't worry about perfection. So if a day goes by and a couple of the decisions I made were not ideal, that's okay. I just move to the next play. And the recalibration tool I use is every single night before I go to sleep, I ask myself a very important question. I say, Alan, you just traded 24 hours of your life for the progress that you made today. Are you happy with that trade? And if the answer is yes, then I can put my head on my pillow and get a very restful night's sleep. In the very rare occasion that the answer is no, it wasn't my best day, I had some lapses in judgment, I made some boneheaded mistakes, and I did not show up as my best self, I give myself some grace, I'm kind to myself, and I still get a peaceful night's sleep because I'm going to get another crack at this thing tomorrow. I don't dwell on it. I don't shame myself. I don't feel guilty. I just say today wasn't my best day, but everybody has off days, and this goes back to the sports analogies. LeBron doesn't play a perfect game every time he takes the court. LeBron misses shots and has off days and loses some games just like everybody else. So it's just important to keep that in mind. And that's really the framework I use. And the reason I use such an overarching one is if I can do those things, to me, that will allow me to be the best I can as a father, will be the best I can as a business owner, will be the best I can as a member of the community. Like those things are overarching. So I don't really worry in my life about setting kind of short-term, temporary, extrinsic goals. Mine is more the intrinsic of this is the man I want to become. And if I can do that regularly, I'll attract everything in my life that will keep enriching my life and make things pretty good.
I love that. And you are preaching to the converted. I mean, I live my life based on these principles. So we are incredibly aligned in all of it. I mean, I always say, like, I have this joke with my kid that I'm like, listen, when I'm 100 and you're 70, I'm still going to beat you in running. Like you'll probably be faster than me from the time that you're 13 until you're about 75. But when I get to 100, I'm going to be at the top of my game. So,
I love it.
Watch out. So I get it. And I love it. Now, how do you do this in a way that you maintain that enthusiasm and that motivation? Because I find that oftentimes people want, this sounds great in theory. This is, it sounds great in theory. And I know how I do it, but like, I'm always curious how other people do it, right? How do you stay in a place where this isn't so much about checking boxes or being, or following rules, but it's almost like an exciting, fun way to approach life?
Oh man, this is always so much fun talking to you. You're so insightful, and I love the direction that we're going with this. This will sound maybe counterintuitive, considering that people call me a motivational speaker. That's not really what I consider myself, but I understand the label and why someone would say that. I actually think motivation is overrated, and it's over-indexed, and it's over-glorified. And people often make the very understandable mistake of thinking you need to be motivated in order to act. When it's been my experience you need to act in order to feel motivated. And the action actually comes from discipline. I think discipline is way more important than motivation, because motivation in essence is a feeling. And as human beings, we are sentient beings, which means our emotions and our feelings are always going to ebb and flow. You know, and we all know that. We can be on top of the world and singing and skipping and in a great mood one moment, hear a piece of news, and then immediately feel lousy or feel upset. You know, so I want my life to be much more consistent than my feelings are, because feelings are going to ebb and flow. So to me, if you only put in work, or you do what's right when you're motivated, then you're only going to do that part of the time. You're not going to be very consistent. Whereas discipline is something we have much more influence and control over. So for me, discipline is the secret. And I say that with a smile because it's not really a secret. Discipline is where I choose to place my bet. You know, I take my physical fitness very seriously. You know, I'd say 365 days in a year, I probably work out, I don't know, between 250 and 280 days a year. So, you know, 4 times a week. And I choose to work, most of my workouts are in the morning. That's my preference because I like the morning. But, you know, I've made posts before about, you know, I got up early this morning and I went for a long run, and inevitably someone will say, you know, well, I wish I was that motivated to do that. And my response to them with a huge smile and a virtual hug is, oh, I didn't feel like doing that this morning. There was not an ounce of motivation. The last thing I felt like doing was bundling up and going for a run. However, I made the disciplined decision to do that because I understand how important that is. And discipline is a decision in the moment. People make the mistake of thinking discipline is predetermined the same way eye color and height are. It's not. So when someone says to me, you know, well, I just can't get up and work out in the morning, I'm not a disciplined person, I let them know that's just the story you tell yourself. You know, you can change that starting tomorrow morning. Now, I'm not implying that that is an easy change to make, but it's not preset. You know, I can't wait. I can't say to myself, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and be 7 feet tall. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm 6'1", and if anything, I'll probably shrink over time, but I'm not getting any taller. There's nothing I can do about that. But I can absolutely start to make different decisions. And discipline just comes down to making a more disciplined decision in the moment. So the reason I bundle up early in the morning and go for an 8-mile run has nothing to do with motivation. If I only worked out on the days I was motivated, I would probably work out 30 days a year as opposed to 280 because of that discipline muscle. And there's nothing unique or special about me in that regard. I've just chosen to prioritize my physical health. Thus, I choose to make disciplined decisions as often as I can. And then the more I start to do that, the more it feeds my confidence, and the more I start to tell myself the opposite narrative, which is I am a disciplined person. I am the type of person that makes a good choice when it comes to bedtime, and makes a good choice when it comes to workouts, and when it makes a good choice when it comes to what I'm going to eat for breakfast. And I do that pretty consistently.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're going to agree with me, but I think you are, based on what I've read in Sustain Your Game, right? Like you've talked about setting yourself up for success ahead of time and all these other things. So there is a little glitch with discipline. And the glitch that I have discovered with discipline is that as the day goes by, your ability to be disciplined starts to reduce. It's like it's almost like a muscle that gets fatigued. And after a while, you can't do it. So similar to you, I work out in the morning, and people think that that's very disciplined of me. But actually, for me personally, the only reason I do it is because in the morning is because it's the time that I have the least energy to contribute to that thing. Meaning I have to expend the least amount of energy to contribute. Why? Because I've gotten used to it. I know, you know, I wait, I don't have to think about it. I wake up and I go to the gym, or I wake up and I go for my run. It's like something that's become ingrained in me. If I don't work out in the morning and I have to think about it all day, there's always going to be things that come up, and the energy that's consuming me is going to make it less likely that I can go. I can still do it because I've done it, but it's less likely. And by the end of the day, not only does it expend too much energy, but I'm so exhausted that I don't want to do it anymore. So discipline no longer serves me at the end of the day. Like the discipline I have at 5 a.m. is very different than the discipline that I have at 7 p.m. So what I have found, and I think you address this really well in Sustain Your Game, is to set yourself up by doing things that it might take discipline at the beginning just to establish that habit, but once it's a habit, it requires a lot less discipline to actually follow through with it because it's ingrained in you. I don't even know if I'm wording it the way that you would, but talk a little bit about that.
You're wording it perfectly and beautifully. And yes, we are completely aligned. There is something, this has been proven. There's something called decision fatigue, that the more decisions we have to make in a given day, it starts to drain our battery the same way using our cell phone does. Most people plug in their cell phone overnight while they're sleeping and they wake up and it's at 100%. And then they go on and do their entire day. And when they get home at 9 p.m., they've got 12% left in their battery. It's the same thing with us. And that really coincides with the ability to be disciplined. Because when we have decision fatigue, we are less likely to make the disciplined decision. So we need to understand that about ourselves. We need to understand that about humanity at large so that we can create a system or a process for our day that allows us to do what you just said, make better decisions more consistently. And doing those things in the morning is usually helpful. I'm a big believer in being very intentional about the bookends of our day. I think we should all be very intentional with how we choose to invest our time and attention in the first 60 minutes after we wake up and the last 60 minutes before we go to bed, because we tend to have a little bit more control over the bookends than we do during the meat of the day, which, as you said, can be unbelievably chaotic. If you've got 3 kids and you're trying to get them off to school, and then you've got work and they've got practices and things after, there's a million things that can come up. But if we can try to protect and guard our yard with the bookends, and it doesn't even have to be 60 and 60, guard the first 20 minutes of your day and the last 20 minutes to do something that nourishes your soul and fills your bucket. And that will allow you to hopefully increase your energy to make these disciplined decisions. And, one of the actionable takeaways I share on stage that I hope your audience finds very helpful is it's called a self-audit. And I'll just explain it now. We don't have time to do it now, but I would love for everyone listening to do this later. Just take a piece of paper and draw a vertical line down the middle. And on the left side, I want you to list all of the things that fill your bucket, that light you up, that make you smile, that give you energy, things that nourish you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like the things that when you do these, you just feel more confident and you feel alive. This could be hopping on your Peloton bike or taking a yoga class or taking your dog for a walk. It could be meditation or prayer or reading a book or listening to a podcast or enjoying some coffee during the stillness of the early morning. It could be having a deep conversation with a family member or a loved one. But come up with a list of the things that absolutely fill your bucket and light you up. Then on the other side of the paper, I want you to write down how you've been spending the bookends of your day. If you look at this past week, what have you been doing when you first wake up? And what have you been doing before you go to bed? And just kind of write down what that looks like. And then I want you to compare the 2 sets of notes, the 2 sides of the paper, and ask yourself one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. And that is, am I doing the things that I know I need to do to fill my bucket so I can be my best self? And if you do this with some honesty and some vulnerability, there's a very good chance you'll start to see a little bit of a disconnect, and you'll uncover what's called a performance gap. And a performance gap is the gap between what we know we should do and what we actually do. And one of the pillars of my work is teaching people how to close that gap. So we start doing the things that we know we need to do to be our best selves. And if you can, with some discipline, start taking some things from the left side of the paper and sprinkling them into your morning and evening routine, you will see a life-changing result in your energy level, in your confidence, in your optimism, and how you show up for others. By prioritizing your self-care, you will immediately become a better and more effective parent, a better and more effective person in your work, whatever that may be, because now your battery will be full, and we have to make the time to do that. So, I make the time to fill my bucket because I want to show up as my best self for my kids, for my audiences, for someone like you who's kind enough to have me on your show. So I don't do those things out of selfishness. I do them out of selflessness because it's what allows me to serve to the greatest capacity.
So you've touched upon a sensitive subject, and it's one that I get asked a lot. And it's referring to that performance gap that you're talking about. I'd be hard pressed to find anyone on this call or anyone in this country that does not know what they're supposed to do. Like, we all know what we're supposed to do, right? If, people come to me all the time for one-on-one coaching, and the first thing that they ask me is like, if they want to improve their habits, or they want to lose weight, or they want to live healthier lives, the first question is, are you going to give me a meal plan? Like, are you going to tell me what to eat? And if I talk to them long enough, they can tell me what they need to eat. Like 9 out of 10 times, they know. I mean, there might be some nuances and tweaks, and of course I can always give suggestions and help. But in terms of like the inner knowing, we know we're supposed to eat well, we're supposed to exercise, we're supposed to sleep. And we know it makes us feel better in theory. And yet, when we don't feel well, it's really hard to do that thing that is going to make us feel better. So the question that I have for you is, in your experience, why do people default to bad habits? Why do people have such a hard time doing the things that make them feel better, even when they know that these things are going to make them feel better? Why do they have such a hard time doing it? And along with that question is, do you see these people that you train, the LeBrons and the Kevin Durants and the Kobe Bryants, do you see a difference between how they approach it and how, other people approach it? So tell me what you think.
And the cool part, I mean, we could reschedule and do an entire separate episode just on this. And it could be a 6-hour training or a 6-hour work. I mean, there is so much in this. So I'll try and be as concise as possible. One of the biggest discernments we all have to understand is the difference between basic and easy. People use those words as if they're interchangeable, but they are not synonyms. Basic and easy do not mean the same thing. I agree with you completely that what it takes, let's just say, to be physically fit is very basic in principle. It's eat healthy foods in appropriate portions, get adequate sleep, hydrate, and move your body most days of the week. Like, it doesn't get any more basic than that. But even I will acknowledge that doing all of those things consistently is not necessarily easy to do. It's hard to do, especially if someone who's listening or watching to this has grooved a certain pattern, a repeatable pattern of behavior that's different than that. Because habits are challenging to break. And if for the last 3 years, you've made the choice to maybe make some unhealthy food decisions and maybe choose not to be as active as you'd like, now you're starting to derive, as crazy as it sounds, you're starting to derive comfort in that, because now it's predictable. And we do try to, we are, as human beings, are attracted to what's predictable. So the other thing is, there is an inverse relationship in many instances, not all of the time, let's just say we agree that, I don't know, blueberries and avocados are really good for you. They're healthy foods. Eating something healthy now, we don't really feel the benefit of that until much, much later. If eating blueberries and avocados is going to add to my longevity and my vitality, it's not like I eat them and 2 seconds later I feel better. I'm postponing the reward. Whereas if I choose to eat something, less healthy, some fast food or some cookies or something, I'm getting that reward immediately because it tastes unbelievable. You get that sugar high or whatever it may be. And it's that relationship that's harder. Same thing with working out. If someone's watching or listening to this and they've been kind of inactive for the last couple of years and they decide they want to start working out, and they go to the gym and they do one workout, their body doesn't look or feel any different after one workout. The result of that is going to be down the road if they consistently do it. But if they choose to just sit on the couch and eat Doritos and binge watch something on Netflix, they enjoy the benefit of that in the moment because it feels good, because it's relaxing, because it tastes good. So that's the inverse relationship is most of the things that we know we should be doing don't really give us a huge reward in that moment. It's somewhat postponed. And that's the hard reality of it. So to me, I believe if you can make hard decisions now, it makes life much easier in the future. Whereas if you make easy decisions now, it makes life much harder in the future. Because, and please know that I'm not saying any of this with an ounce of judgment. I have nothing but compassion and love for people. If someone is choosing to sit on the couch, eat Doritos and watch Netflix, That doesn't bother me a bit. And it absolutely does not mean that you are not a wonderful human being. That is a choice that you make. And I believe in freedom of choice. But if you were to continue to do that for the next 20 years, you probably won't love where your life is at that point. So the easy decision now is going to make life much harder in the future. Whereas if you make the hard decision now, which is go work out and eat some avocados and blueberries, it will make the future much easier. And I think it's that inverse relationship that really throws a thorn in the paw of what we're all trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. You, like I said, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. My dad literally wrote a book called Don't Eat the Marshmallow Yet, which is about delaying gratification, right? Like this is all about having the emotional intelligence to be able to delay gratification. This is the last thing that I want to touch upon because I want to open it up for questions. So if anybody just loves what you guys are hearing and you want to put some questions on the chat, this is a really good time because I'm going to give us a few minutes to kind of like entertain questions and engage with you guys. Okay. Perfect. Which, by the way, Francis had posted, I wanted to share with you. Francis had posted, thank you for the message on parenting, because I think you spoke to her soul. Awesome. And Evie was talking about, she didn't know that decision fatigue, that there was an actual name for what she's been feeling. So you gave her a label, which is, oh my God, you know, that's amazing. So
that's awesome.
So my last question, and I think this is relevant to you having an Aura ring right now, right? Like I just saw on social media that you had just gotten the Aura ring, which is all exciting. And that is that oftentimes when we're talking about these habits, performance goals, the gap, delaying rewards, you know, our future self, discipline, discipline. It all sounds like a big, huge sacrifice. It's like exhausting, right? And yeah, you do the hard thing now and it gets easier later, and that's great. But again, I'm gonna go back to that. Our muscle gets worn out, and sometimes you don't want to be in a state of sacrifice all the time. And I have seen so many of my clients that they are so busy checking off boxes. I must work out. I must exercise, eat well. I cannot have the dessert. I can't have the dessert. I can't have the dessert. But it's all from the mind frame, the mindset of pain and of sacrifice and of grit. And I don't think that long-term, that is what carries you through. What I have seen, and I just want to know if you have seen this, is that people that can maintain a life of grit is really because they start to enjoy it. Like there's fun and excitement and curiosity, and there's an empowered feeling about it. Like there is an enthusiasm where you may be doing hard things, but you are not in a state of sacrifice all the time. What do you think about that?
Oh, I agree completely. And what I choose to do, so there's first of all, the word should is a very dangerous word because it denies our humanity in the moment. And when we keep telling ourselves, well, I should be doing this or I shouldn't be doing this, ultimately we weave that together with kind of shame and guilt. And we make ourselves feel bad because of some of the decisions we're making. And I want to try to help relieve that of people. And I certainly have tried to relieve that in my own life, where I'm never going to make anything in my life better by adding shame and guilt to it. All that's going to do is weigh me down and make me feel worse. So yes, I try to make disciplined decisions as often as I can, but I try not to look through the lens of, well, this is what I should be doing. I allow how I'm feeling in the moment, I take that into consideration for sure. And I also try not to look through the lens of good and bad and right and wrong. I don't tell myself things like eating dessert is bad. Eating dessert is not bad. I look at everything through a very neutral lens. It's completely sterile. It only becomes good or bad when we associate feelings or emotions to it. So, there is nothing bad about eating dessert. Now, for me and the person that I'm trying to become 20 years from now, I've made the decision that I'm not going to eat dessert every single night. That will be for special occasions, maybe once a week if I'm celebrating somebody's birthday. And I give myself permission to do that because I'm a human being. I don't say to myself, I really shouldn't eat that piece of cake because it's bad for me. I simply say, yeah, if I want to enjoy the social aspect, we're out for somebody's birthday and I'll enjoy it. That's great. And I can do it guilt-free. And then I'll just make sure the next decision I make is probably a more disciplined one. So I live an incredibly happy and fulfilled life. I don't view the decisions that I make as sacrifices. I mean, I actually enjoy making disciplined decisions because it makes me feel better, and it takes me on the path of the person that I'm trying to become for my own self, as well as the person that I'm trying to be to model for my children, so that I'm planting the right seeds for them. So I want to go back to something I said very early in our conversation, is I want everyone to be kind to themselves, everyone to give themselves some compassion, everyone cut themselves some slack. You know, if you've committed to working out and going for a walk every morning, and you wake up one day and it's freezing and it's raining out and you don't feel like going for a walk, guess what? You're human. It's okay. I don't blame you for not wanting to go for a walk. And if you choose not to walk that morning and do something else instead, don't beat yourself up for making that decision. It's okay. And maybe it'll be a little nicer weather tomorrow and you can start your streak again in the morning. So I think we all just have to be very careful in how we can talk to ourselves, because it's been my experience that most people are way more critical of themselves than they'd ever be with somebody else. You know, I mean, Caroline, you and I are friends. If you called me up tonight and said, Alan, man, I had a lousy day. You know, a couple of things didn't go my way. I had a couple of, I made a couple of bad decisions. I snapped at my kids. You know, the first thing I would do as your friend would be to try to offer you some comfort. And I would say, I know what it's like to have a bad day. I can empathize with you, but just know that I believe in you. I know what an amazing human being you are, and I'm sure tomorrow will be a little bit better. And I would do everything I can to speak kindly and offer empathy, compassion, and support and comfort. The problem is we don't talk to ourselves that way. I may lend that advice to you as my friend, and then when I have a lousy day, I sit and stew in it, and I'm critical, and I beat myself up, and I can't believe I did that. That was so stupid. So for me, if we can learn to talk to ourselves the way that we talk to the people that we care about, that's an amazing first step. And try not to get caught up in the shoulds or the should nots. Try not to look at the world as either good or bad. And those have just been frameworks that have helped me.
Yeah. And it's very aligned to what you said as being a parent, right? So if one of your frameworks for being a parent is not to be overly critical of your children, or, badgering them because they're not meeting your expectations, or accepting them as neutral, even if they don't get the best grades or they don't, score 12 points at the game. Well, if you're going to live your life by that lens for them, then that's something that you should model for yourself as well, because you're an example to that.
Yeah.
And also when you look at life like that, we tend to be very critical of ourselves, and we tend to be very critical of the people that we love the most, because we want so much good for them. Like, we want them to be their best selves. So we get to be, sometimes we have these expectations of them, and we can get down that rabbit hole. So I think it applies just full circle back to what you said at the beginning of the call about being a parent, and also about how you treat yourself. So thank you for this. Does anybody have any questions that you want to ask? You can unmute yourself and you can ask Alan. You can, show your face. We've got a lot of black screens, but I would love to see you guys. And this is your chance. I mean, this is a man who works with Kevin Durant, with LeBron, with Kobe Bryant, with all these incredible people, and he's got such amazing insight. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask? I've got Daisy here who said, I'm so hard on myself. Thank you for the permission to slip.
Absolutely, Daisy. Give yourself some kindness and some compassion. Just know it'll be all right. And always refocus that lens on the next play. Don't worry about what just happened. Focus on the next play.
Oh, this is a great question. So do you fast? Are you a faster?
Yeah, I am. I use the Zero app to keep track. I mean, I don't always know the difference between, what do they call it? I guess I call it intermittent fasting. In fact, I did a 36-hour fast last week. That's the longest that I've chosen to do at present for water only. But for the most part, I only eat between a 6 and 8 hour window every single day. Depending on my workout schedule and travel schedule, sometimes that changes. But yeah, usually don't eat much after 7 p.m. and rarely eat much before 10 or 11 a.m. So I don't know if you're considering that fasting, but yeah, I absolutely do that.
Yes, absolutely. So that's like time restricted eating, which is a
Yeah.
form of intermittent fasting.
Yep.
And so Francis put, this is motivation for our fast next week, because you may not know that I actually host a 5-day mimic fast as part of my business. I
didn't know that.
Partnered with a doctor. Yeah. So it's Dr. Sanchez and myself. He's an anti-aging expert. I do the whole life coaching, personal development aspect. He does the science and medicine and expertise on what's going on in your body aspect.
Wow.
But we have a 5-day fast, which a bunch of people on this call are registered for. And it's one of those things where at first glance, it may feel that it's hard, or that, you may be intimidated from doing it and on all this other stuff, but it's what's on the other side of it is pretty much what's on the other side of all these habits that you talk about, right? Like it's like transformational, it's enlightening, it's incredible. So we always tell people the importance of fasting and time restricted eating is just one more piece of the puzzle that we incorporate in all these amazing habits. So you're going to have to try RejuvaFast with us one of these days.
Awesome. Would be, yeah, definitely down for that. Would love that. I'm always game to tinker with anything like that and under that umbrella. And, actually the time restricted eating that I do is a perfect example of, I kind of set these guidelines. But if I step outside of them here and there, it's okay. And I don't beat myself up over it. A lot of times for me with eating in particular, I do let my hunger dictate it. And perfect example, last night, I think it was 9:30 p.m. and I was unusually starving last night. So I made myself something to eat, like I normally don't eat after 6 or 7, but I did it and it was delicious. And I watched Netflix while I was doing it. And there wasn't an ounce of guilt or shame. And guess what? I woke up today and I'm just fine. So I gave myself permission to step outside of those boundaries. And I just think that's what's most important, that we can all have a rough North Star that we're trying to pursue, but that's never going to be a straight shot to get there. And to me, the most important part is enjoying the journey and the path of getting there. It's not just hoping that we're going to get there. And then if we do, let's enjoy life. Let's enjoy it now. And part of that goes back to just being kind to ourselves when we slip up and mess up. I mean, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that is the basic premise of dieting, right? Let me just sacrifice so I can enjoy my life when I lose weight. Right. And it has such a negative connotation, because we all know it doesn't work that way. That's the surefire way to keep you the rest of your life struggling with your weight, is if you're focused so much on getting to that finish line so then you can enjoy. What about learning how to enjoy eating well, and then occasionally indulging, and occasionally fasting, and occasionally nourishing, and being in the journey, so that you are never in that crisis mode that we get into when we think about dieting.
Yes. And learning to love yourself and your body at present. There's nothing wrong with thinking, I wish I was a little more toned here. I wish I could lose 5. Like, I get it. We're human beings and we have different aspirations. But the key to that is just learning to love yourself how you are at present, and then learning to develop the habits and the mindsets of the type of person that has what it is that you aspire to have. So instead of saying, I'm going to follow this diet for 8 weeks so that I can look like this in my bathing suit, instead just say, the type of person that looks like that in a bathing suit, what are the types of things they do on a daily basis? What are the decisions that they make? And I want to start making more of those decisions. So again, it goes way for me. And I don't ever want to sound preachy. These are only things that have worked in my life. Everybody can take them or leave them however they want, but it's all about the process. It's not, I'm not too hung up on whether or not I can lose 5 pounds. I want to every day of my life to try and make pretty good nutritional decisions and just let the chips fall where they may. And it's been my experience that when you focus on the process, you tend to get more of the outcomes you desired in the first place.
Amen to that. Last question is, what are your guidelines on sleep?
Well, first and foremost, I heavily prioritize sleep. I know it's when we talk about health and wellness and longevity and vitality, it's the least sexy of the things to talk about. It's way sexier to talk about the new workout routine or the new diet or fasting or any of these other things that have a little buzz to them. Sleep is the least sexy, but it is arguably the most important. There have been so many studies that show how we feel, our performance, how we look, all goes down significantly when we're not adequately rested. So I have an evening routine, a sleep routine, the same way I have a morning routine. It's been my experience, especially on social media, morning routines tend to get all of the glamour, but the evening routine is just as important, because you know what comes before your morning routine? The previous night's evening routine. It's the chicken and the egg. So for me,
it's your bookend.
It's my bookends. So people will probably be fairly surprised that this is coming from a motivational speaker, but part of my unwinding process is I do watch a good show or a movie on Netflix or Amazon. Like, first of all, for a little context, I am absolutely fascinated by acting, directing, cinematography, storytelling, writing. So I actually get a tremendous amount of enjoyment in watching something because there's a fascination and a curiosity. But for me, it also allows me to just turn my mind off, where I'm not thinking about or worrying about anything else. And that's usually, so I choose not to eat, last night being an exception, about 3 hours before I'm going to go to bed. About an hour before I go to bed, I wear my blue blocker glasses because I'm a total nerd and they help block some of the blue rays, which will help my body actually start to unwind. I'll find a show that I have an interest or a curiosity in, and I'll binge watch that for, maybe 60 minutes. And then I'll put myself to bed at a very consistent time. I'm usually in bed by 10 o'clock Eastern every single night. My room is pitch black. My room is cold. I don't use any electronics. I keep my phone there just in case there was an overnight emergency. But the only person who can get through overnight is my ex-wife or my children, because I have my notifications turned off, but they happen to be set to favorites. And I do a CBD gummy about 45 minutes before I go to bed, because that also helps kind of chill me out a little bit. And that's my routine. And I do that whether I'm at home. I do that whether I have my kids. I do that whether or not I'm traveling. Like, I stick to that script as much as I can. And yes, occasionally there'll be a one-off. So I'm going to stay out a little bit later because a friend from college is in town. That's fine. I'm happy to make that exception. But most of the time, that's my routine. And most of the time, I get pretty good sleep. And last night so I just got the Oura Ring. Yesterday was the first day that I wore it. And last night was my first sleep that I wore it. And I woke up this morning with a score of I think 83, which was pretty decent for optimal. I had one of my followers send me a DM, says he's been wearing his Oura Ring for 2 straight years and he's never had an 83 on sleep, which was an eye opener for him. So it just shows that now that I can start to measure and monitor my sleep, I'll probably make some tweaks moving forward, but it's definitely something I prioritize. So when I wake up every single morning, well-rested, optimistic, and full of energy, it's not an accident and it's not luck. It's because I prioritize sleep, which is what allows me to do that. And I would recommend that everyone does that, because we know as human beings, when we lack sleep, we are grouchy. We have trouble making decisions. We have trouble being disciplined. We have trouble regulating our emotions. We tend to snap at people. We're impatient. We tend to have negative thoughts. All of those things are exponentially worse. So if there's only going to be one takeaway from this entire discussion we've had, let it be to start prioritizing your sleep ASAP.
Yeah. And one cool thing about the Oura Ring that I learned yesterday is that because it has cumulative effects, the more it learns your patterns and behaviors, the more it gives you advice. So for example, if you've had 3 great weeks at 83 and then you have a bad night, it's going to tell you, hey, slow down today. Don't work out so hard. Don't, exert so much energy. Like, give yourself some grace, which I think is really cool that it does that.
Yeah. And I'm going to listen to it. I mean, I think that's important. That was one of the reasons that I got it. Before I said that which gets praised gets repeated. Well, I also know that which gets measured gets improved. So I can start to tinker around and see if I start making slight adjustments to my evening routine and my quality of sleep, according to Aura, starts going up, then I will do more of that. And when I start doing things that cause my quality of sleep to go down, then I'll start doing less of that. And if I'm traveling a lot and working out a lot and my Oura Ring says, hey, you need to slow out and chill out today, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to take a full day off and I'm going to do it guilt-free, because the ring told me to do it. And I think that will help me continue to move closer to this 66-year-old gentleman I'm striving to become.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, you are living a very intentional life, and that is something to be admired and praised. So I hope it is always repeated until you're 66 and 96. Oh God.
Well,
So
let me
we're
say
5 minutes over, Alan, but somebody just asked a question about your morning routine. So I don't know if you want to go over just a few minutes and tell them what your morning routine is. It's up to you.
I saw that. If I did not have another call, I would stay as long as you would ever have me. But here's what I'll tell everyone to do. You can follow me on Instagram at Alan Stein Jr. or LinkedIn. And if I did not get a chance to answer your question, just shoot me a DM. Just cut and paste your question into a DM, and I promise I'll respond to all of them. I always want to be helpful and be of service. Happy to share my morning routine, with the person that had asked that question. But I actually do have to run to another call.
Yes. So everybody, please get his book at Amazon, Sustain Your Game. He's got Sustain Your Game, which I have on my Kindle. He's got Raise Your Game, which I have right here. Follow him on Instagram, Alan Stein. You can connect with him through me. And thank you for your time, Alan.
You're so welcome. It was awesome. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to those DMs.
Bye.
Bye, guys.